The text she sent to the wrong number started everything. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. It all began on a rainy Thursday night in downtown Seattle. The city lights shimmered through the mist as Lila Turner sat by her apartment window, staring at her phone screen. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, her mind racing after another 12-hour day at the ad agency. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, and the hospital had just called again about her mother's overdue payment. Lila sighed, her thumb hovering over a half-written message meant for her ex-boyfriend, Jake, who had broken her heart a month earlier. I am tired of pretending everything is fine. Maybe we should just get married and stop running in circles, she had typed, half angry, half broken. But when she pressed send, the name at the top of her screen was not Jake. It was a number she did not recognize. She gasped, realizing what she had done. Oh no. No, she whispered, trying to delete it, but it was too late. Seconds later, her phone buzzed. A single reply appeared, let us discuss the terms. Lila frowned, her heart skipping a beat. Who talks like that? Probably a prank, she thought. She tossed her phone aside and went to make coffee, the kind of late-night ritual that kept her sane. Across town, high above the skyline in a penthouse office, Ethan Cole leaned back in his chair, staring at the same message on his phone. The CEO of Cole Media was known for being sharp, unshakable, and cold as the glass tower he ruled from. But that one text made him pause. I am tired of pretending everything is fine. Maybe we should just get married and stop running in circles. He reread it twice. He had just returned from another brutal board meeting, where his uncles demanded he marry within 6 months to secure his inheritance clause. And now, out of nowhere, a stranger had texted him those words. Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. Maybe fate just sent me a sign, he murmured. The next morning, Lila's phone buzzed again. My assistant will schedule a meeting. I believe we can help each other. The number signed off simply E, she almost laughed. Help each other? What is this, some sort of scam? But curiosity won. She replied, I think you have the wrong person. Within a minute, the response came no. I think I have the right one. Hours later, standing in the marble lobby of Cole Media, Lila regretted every decision that led her there. She wore her best blazer, which still could not hide how nervous she felt. When the elevator doors opened, Ethan was waiting. Tall, tailored, composed, he looked like every woman's definition of danger. Miss Turner, he greeted, his tone even. I believe your text was meant for someone else. But it may have reached exactly who it needed to. Lila blinked, speechless. What are you talking about? Ethan gestured for her to sit. I need a wife. Temporarily. A marriage in name only. You need financial stability. It seems we both made a mistake that could solve 2 problems. Lila laughed in disbelief. You are joking. He leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Do I look like a man who jokes? The rain began tapping against the glass again, soft but steady, like a metronome marking the moment her life changed. She should have walked away. Instead, she found herself asking, what exactly are the terms? Ethan's eyes softened just slightly. No feelings. No complications. 6 months. And in return, I will clear every debt you have. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Outside, thunder rumbled over the city as if sealing their unspoken deal. And that was how it all began, with one wrong text, one impossible offer, and 2 people who had no idea that pretending to be in love would soon become the most real thing they had ever felt. The next morning, Lila woke up to a headache that had nothing to do with sleep. Her phone still showed the last message from Ethan Cole, the stranger who had offered her a contract marriage. She had read it so many times that the words had lost meaning, yet every time she thought about it, her chest tightened. Outside her apartment window, the city stretched under a pale gray sky, the hum of traffic muffled by rain. She made herself coffee and whispered, "You are not really considering this, are you?" But she was. By noon, she was back in the same building she had sworn never to return to, standing before the glass doors of Cole Media. The receptionist greeted her by name this time and led her to the top floor. The elevator ride felt endless, every floor a drumbeat of doubt. When the doors opened, Ethan was already waiting. He wore the same dark suit, perfectly tailored, a calmness in his expression that both annoyed and unsettled her. "Miss Turner," he said with a nod, "you came." "I came to say no," she replied, even though her voice trembled. "Excellent," he said smoothly, "then we can start from honesty." He gestured toward the conference table where a single file sat waiting. "These are the terms. You will read them, and then decide." Lila crossed her arms. "You cannot be serious. People do not just marry strangers." Ethan met her gaze. "People make deals every day, Miss Turner. Some with higher stakes than this." Her pulse raced as she opened the folder. The pages looked like any other business contract: dates, signatures, confidentiality clauses, but the title at the top made her breath catch: Temporary Marriage Agreement. She skimmed through it, her eyes widening. 6 months? Appear at events? Live in your residence? A public marriage, Ethan explained. For the board, for stability. No physical expectations, no emotional entanglement. In return, I will clear your debts and transfer a security fund to your name. It is mutually beneficial. It is insane, she muttered. Ethan's mouth curved slightly. Perhaps. But it is also simple. You have 3 days. Lila closed the folder. You think money fixes everything? No, he said quietly, but it gives us both time to breathe. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the rain lightened, leaving streaks of silver against the glass. Lila finally stood. You do not know me. Then let me, he said. That is part of the contract. She walked out without answering, but his voice followed her. You will call before Friday. I am certain. The rest of the day blurred. She tried to focus at work, but her thoughts spun around that offer. By the time she got home, her mother's nurse had called twice about unpaid bills. Lila sat on the couch, staring at the contract now folded in her purse. She thought of her father's old words, pride does not pay rent. She pressed her hands to her face, maybe 6 months is not forever. Friday came faster than she expected. When she walked back into Cole Media, she was soaked from the rain, her heart hammering like it was trying to escape. Ethan looked up from his desk when she entered. Miss Turner, he said, rising, have you decided? She met his gaze. I will do it. But I have conditions. Name them, he said. I keep my job. I will not quit or hide who I am. And when this is over, we go our separate ways. Ethan nodded slowly. Agreed. He signed the final page, handed her the pen, and said, Welcome to our 6-month marriage, Mrs. Cole. The pen trembled in her hand as she signed. She felt the weight of every stroke, each letter binding her to something she did not yet understand. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, echoing like an omen. But for now, she told herself it was just paper, just business. Neither of them knew how wrong they were. 2 weeks later, Lila Turner was standing in front of the mirror in a marble dressing room inside Ethan Cole's penthouse. A stylist adjusted the straps of her gown while another brushed her hair into soft waves. Lila stared at her reflection, barely recognizing the woman in the mirror. The waitress-turned-marketer now looked like she belonged in glossy magazines, but inside, she felt like a stranger trapped in silk. You look stunning, Mrs. Cole, the stylist said. Lila flinched. She was still not used to hearing that name. Downstairs, Ethan waited in a tailored black tuxedo, scrolling through his phone with his usual calm. When he looked up and saw her walking down the stairs, his expression changed just slightly enough for her to notice. "Try not to look so surprised," she said dryly. "You hired professionals, remember?" Ethan smirked faintly. "The professionals did well. But credit where it is due, you carry it better than expected." She rolled her eyes but could not stop the small flutter in her chest. The car ride to the gala was quiet, filled with city lights flickering through tinted glass. She caught glimpses of her reflection beside his two people playing roles neither had rehearsed for. At the hotel ballroom, cameras flashed as soon as they arrived. Reporters whispered, curious about the sudden marriage of the elusive CEO. Ethan placed a steady hand on her back. "Smile, and remember, tonight is about appearances." Lila took a breath, lifting her chin. The chandelier light glimmered against her earrings as they stepped onto the red carpet. "Mr. Cole, congratulations on your marriage," one journalist called. Ethan smiled politely. "Thank you. My wife prefers to stay out of the spotlight." "That will not be easy," Lila murmured under her breath, her smile fixed. Once inside, she exhaled, letting her shoulders drop. "I am terrible at this." "You did fine," Ethan said. "Just remember the terms: no affection, no attachment. We play our parts, and both get what we need." "You make it sound romantic," she said with a dry laugh. But as the night went on, something unexpected happened. During dinner, one of the senior board members, a man named Mr. Hayes, turned to Lila and said, "So tell me, Mrs. Cole, what does it feel like to marry for power?" Lila froze, fork halfway to her lips. Ethan's eyes flicked up sharply, but before he could speak, Lila smiled sweetly. "It feels the same as marrying for money, Mr. Hayes. Except one of us still believes in hard work." A ripple of laughter spread around the table. Mr. Hayes turned red. Ethan's gaze lingered on her, something new flickering their pride, maybe even admiration. When they finally left the gala, the rain had started again, tapping lightly on the roof of the car. "You handled yourself well," Ethan said. "I do not like being underestimated," Lila replied. "Neither do I," he said quietly. They exchanged a look that lasted just a second too long before both turned away. Back at the penthouse, she removed her jewelry and heels, her feet aching from hours of smiling. Ethan stood by the window, loosening his tie. "You were impressive tonight," he said. "Do not say that like it surprises you." "It does not surprise me," he said, his voice lower now. "It reminds me why I chose you." For a moment, neither of them moved. The city glowed behind him, and the space between them seemed charged with something unspoken. Then Ethan cleared his throat. "We have another event next week. My assistant will send you the schedule." Lila nodded, grabbing her purse. "Of course, Mr. Cole." When she turned to leave, he said, "Good night, Lila." It was the first time he had said her name softly, without formality. She paused, then replied, "Good night, Ethan." The elevator doors closed behind her, sealing the fragile quiet. In the mirrored reflection, she saw herself again, not the fake wife, not the woman in silk, but someone on the edge of something dangerous. And for the first time, she was not sure if she wanted to step back or fall. 3 months passed, and what began as a contract started to feel less like a performance and more like a strange rhythm neither of them had planned. Lila Turner had learned Ethan Cole's routines by heart: the early morning coffee without sugar, the silence he kept until 9, the way he loosened his tie when he was thinking too hard. She had also learned that beneath his calculated calm, he was a man running from ghosts. One night, she walked into the penthouse library and found him staring at an old photo framed on the shelf. It showed a younger Ethan with a woman who had his same gray-blue eyes. "Your mother?" she asked softly. He did not turn, but his voice was low. "She passed away when I was 17. My father remarried 2 weeks later. The board loved to call her the real power behind the company." She tried to erase every trace of my mother. Lila felt something twist in her chest. I am sorry. Ethan shrugged. I learned early that love is a transaction. You give enough, you keep your seat. You stop giving, you disappear. She stepped closer. That sounds lonely. He finally looked at her. It is efficient. The conversation ended there, but something had shifted. The next day, during a lunch with clients, Lila accidentally spilled water on an executive's presentation papers. She apologized, but the man muttered under his breath, typical charity case wife. Ethan heard it. His jaw tightened. Apologize to my wife, he said sharply. The man stammered, it was just a joke. Ethan leaned forward. Then laugh harder. The table fell silent until the man muttered a quick sorry. Afterward, Lila scolded him in the car. You cannot just threaten people for me. You are my wife in public, he said. They will treat you with respect. She sighed. Even if this marriage is fake? He looked at her then, eyes unreadable. It does not feel fake when someone insults you. That night, she found herself unable to sleep. His words echoed in her head. She got up and walked to the balcony where the city lights shimmered below. Ethan was already there, sitting with a glass of scotch. Insomnia? He asked. She nodded. You too? Always. She joined him, the cool air brushing her hair. For a while, neither spoke. Then she said quietly, you could have fired him instead of defending me. Ethan's eyes met hers. I do not want people to fear you. I want them to see what I see. And what do you see? She whispered. Someone who does not realize her worth, he said. The honesty in his tone disarmed her. The night went still, the sound of the city fading into the background. She wanted to say anything but her throat tightened. Instead, she turned away, pretending to look at the skyline. You talk like this is more than business, she said finally. Maybe it is, he replied. Days turned into weeks, and the boundaries of their agreement blurred. They shared dinners without reason, laughter without caution. Once, when the power went out during a storm, they ended up sitting on the floor of the living room, candles flickering between them. Lila found herself telling him about her father's dream to open a small art studio before he passed. Ethan listened, really listened, like no one ever had. You could still do that, he said. I do not have the money. That can change, he said simply. The way he said it made her heart beat faster. As the storm roared outside, Lila realized something terrifying. She was no longer pretending. The next morning, she caught herself waiting for him to come down for coffee, and when he smiled at her from across the kitchen, it felt like the sun had decided to rise just for that moment. The contract still hung between them, unspoken yet heavy. But every glance, every word, was breaking it piece by piece. And though neither dared to admit it, both already knew their 6-month deal had crossed a line no paper could define. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the penthouse, bathing everything in soft gold. It had been almost 5 months since Lila Turner signed that ridiculous contract, and yet the world now called her Mrs. Cole without hesitation. Today was supposed to be just another corporate charity event, another night of pretending, but something about the way Ethan adjusted his cufflinks that morning told her it mattered. You seem nervous, she teased, sipping her coffee. Cole Media does not do nervous, he replied with a faint smile, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. That evening, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and polite conversation. Lila wore a simple black gown that Ethan had chosen himself, claiming it looked effortlessly powerful. When they entered, all eyes turned. The board members lined up like hawks, assessing every detail. At the head table, Ethan's stepmother, Veronica Cole, raised her glass. To family, she said, her voice dripping with sweetness that did not match her eyes. Lila had seen that look before, the kind that measured people by their usefulness. During dinner, Veronica leaned close. You have done well polishing your image, dear. I can almost believe this little arrangement is real. Lila's fork froze halfway to her lips. Arrangement? Veronica smiled. Oh, please. Do you really think no one knows? Your little marriage contract is the board's favorite secret. The blood drained from Lila's face. Ethan's hand tightened around his wine glass. That is enough, Veronica. But she only laughed softly. Careful, Ethan. If the press ever finds out, it will not be your company that falls, it will be her reputation. The table went silent. Lila felt heat rush to her cheeks, the weight of 100 eyes pressing down. Ethan stood abruptly. We are leaving. Outside, the cold air bit against her skin as they stepped into the limousine. Lila stared out the window, fighting the sting in her eyes. She was right, Ethan. This whole thing is a lie. It was, he said, his voice rougher than usual. It stopped being one when I started caring. She turned to him, stunned. Do not say that just because you feel guilty. It is not guilt, Lila. It is truth. She shook her head, trying to steady her breath. You cannot say things like that when there is still a contract between us. Ethan looked away, the streetlights flashing across his face. Then maybe it is time we end it. Her heart dropped, but before she could speak, his phone buzzed. A text appeared from an unknown number, a photo of their signed contract and a message, the media gets this at midnight unless you pay up. Ethan's jaw clenched. Someone leaked it. Lila grabbed the phone. Who would do that? Someone with access. Someone who wanted to ruin us. His eyes darkened. Veronica. That night, Ethan made calls, sending his legal team scrambling, while Lila paced the living room. The walls felt like they were closing in. If this goes public, my career is over, she said. Ethan came to her side, his voice low but steady. No, Lila. If it goes public, I will tell them the truth, that I married you because I wanted to, not because I needed to. She stared at him, disbelieving. That is not in the contract. Then it is time to rewrite it, he said. The silence that followed was filled with everything they had never said. In that moment, she realized he was not the cold strategist everyone feared. He was a man ready to risk his empire for her dignity. What if this destroys you? She whispered. Then I will rebuild, he said simply. But I will not let anyone destroy you. She looked at him for a long time, and for once, words failed her. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled across the skyline, the same way it had the night they first met. It felt like the universe was circling back, forcing them to face the truth that neither contract nor lies could contain. And as they stood there, two signatures bound by paper but hearts bound by something far deeper, Lila finally whispered, maybe it was never a mistake after all. The next 48 hours were chaos. The story of Ethan Cole's contract marriage exploded across every news outlet and social feed. Headlines screamed betrayal, scandal, deception. Paparazzi camped outside the penthouse, shouting questions that cut like blades. Lila Turner sat on the couch, hands trembling as she stared at the television. Her photo filled the screen, a blurry shot of her leaving the gala with Ethan, rain glistening in her hair. The reporter's voice was merciless. Sources confirm the marriage between billionaire Ethan Cole and marketing assistant Lila Turner was a business arrangement meant to secure his inheritance. Lila switched it off, her breath shallow. They are tearing us apart, she whispered. Ethan entered the room, his phone pressed to his ear, giving instructions in that calm, commanding tone that somehow steadied her. No statements, he said. Not yet. Let them talk. When he hung up, she turned to him. How can you stay so calm? Because panic is what they want, he said quietly. The truth will come out. What truth? She asked, her voice breaking. That we pretended to be married and then accidentally fell for each other? Ethan walked closer, his expression unreadable. That we stopped pretending a long time ago. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Security. Mr. Cole, the board meeting has been moved up. They want you at headquarters in 1 hour. Lila's stomach dropped. They are going to vote you out, are they not? Ethan gave a small, tired smile. Probably. But it was bound to happen sooner or later. Because of me? She asked. Because I made them remember what fear looks like, he corrected. An hour later, Ethan faced the boardroom filled with shareholders, cameras, and his stepmother Veronica, who wore triumph like perfume. You have humiliated this company, she said. You lied to your investors and the press. You are unfit to lead. Ethan let her speak, his eyes scanning the room before he finally stood. You are right. I made a deal, one that began as business. But what you call a lie, I call evolution. Because somewhere along the line, I realized something no balance sheet can measure: integrity, compassion, loyalty. Everything you taught me to dismiss. Murmurs filled the room. Miss Turner may have entered my life through a contract, he continued, but she reminded me what leadership means: to protect, to believe, and to stand for something real. Veronica's face paled. You are finished, she hissed. Ethan smiled slightly. Then I will finish with my head up. He set his resignation on the table and walked out, ignoring the gasps behind him. Lila was waiting in the lobby, anxiety written across her face. When she saw him, she rushed forward. Ethan, what happened? I quit, he said simply. You quit your company? It was never mine if I had to lie to keep it. She stared at him, stunned. You threw everything away. Not everything, he said softly, touching her hand. Just what did not matter. That night, they escaped the city, driving for hours until the skyline disappeared behind them. They ended up at a small seaside inn where no one recognized them. The air smelled of salt and rain. For the first time in months, there were no cameras, no boardrooms, no contracts, just silence. Lila stood by the window, watching waves crash against the shore. You could have fought them, she said quietly. Ethan came up behind her, his reflection beside hers in the glass. I did, I just chose a different battle. She turned, tears stinging her eyes. What happens now? He smiled, the first real smile she had ever seen from him. Now, we start over. No lies, no signatures. Just us. The words hung between them, fragile and real. Outside, the storm finally broke, washing the last of the city's noise from their world. In that quiet moment, Lila realized the scandal had destroyed everything except the one thing worth saving: the truth between them. Days at the seaside inn slipped by quietly, the kind of quiet that healed instead of haunted. Lila Turner and Ethan Cole settled into a rhythm that was both strange and peaceful. He spent mornings reading on the porch, the ocean breeze ruffling his hair, while she walked along the shore collecting seashells and trying to forget the chaos they had left behind. At night, they cooked simple meals together, laughing when Ethan burned the pasta or forgot to add salt. The tension that had once defined them melted into something gentler, something real. One evening, as the sun sank low over the horizon, Lila found Ethan sitting on the sand, his shoes off, his sleeves rolled up, watching the waves. She sat beside him, their shoulders brushing. You know, she said softly, I thought I would miss the city. The noise, the rush. But I do not. Ethan smiled faintly. The city never made you alive. It just kept you busy. And what about you? She asked. Do you miss your empire? He looked down at the sand slipping through his fingers. For years, I thought power was security. But it turns out peace is rarer. Lila watched him in silence, realizing how much he had changed. The man who once measured everything in profit now spoke like someone rediscovering what it meant to breathe. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Walking away? Only that I did not do it sooner, he replied. The wind carried their words away, leaving a comfortable stillness. Then, almost shyly, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It was her wedding ring, the one she had returned when the scandal broke. "I kept it," he said. "Not because of what it meant on paper, but because it reminded me of when you chose to stand beside me, even when it made no sense." Lila's throat tightened. "Ethan," he turned to her, his voice low but steady. "I know we said no more contracts, no more pretending, but if I were to ask again without the board, without conditions, would your answer still be yes?" Her eyes filled with tears. "You are serious?" "More than I have ever been." For a long moment, she said nothing, just watched the man who had once seemed untouchable now sitting barefoot in the sand, waiting. Then she smiled through her tears. "Yes." But this time, no signatures. Ethan laughed softly, relief and joy breaking through the weight of everything they had endured. He slipped the ring onto her finger again, and it glimmered in the fading light like something new, something earned. As the tide rose and the stars began to appear, Lila leaned her head against his shoulder. The world had taken their titles, their wealth, their control, but it had given them something far greater. For the first time in both their lives, they belonged not to a company or a contract, but to each other. The following months became a quiet chapter that neither Ethan Cole nor Lila Turner had expected. Away from headlines and cameras, they built something that resembled a real life. Lila started painting again, using the attic of the Seaside Inn as her studio. The walls filled with color, sunsets, waves, city skylines she no longer feared. Ethan helped her stretch canvases, his once impeccable suits replaced by rolled sleeves and laughter that came easier now. Sometimes locals stopped by to buy her work, and she would blush each time, not realizing Ethan had anonymously arranged for her first exhibition in the nearby town. When she found out, she confronted him with a mix of anger and tenderness. "You did this without telling me," she said. Ethan smiled. "I did not want you to doubt that you deserve the spotlight. This time, it is all yours." The opening night was small but full of warmth. People admired her art, unaware of who she truly was. For the first time, Lila stood in a room where her name meant something because of her own hands, not someone else's fortune. Ethan stood quietly at the back, watching her talk to guests, pride softening every edge of his usual composure. Later, when the gallery lights dimmed and the crowd drifted away, she walked up to him. "You stayed in the corner the whole night." He shrugged. "You did not need me there." "You are wrong," she said softly. "I always did, just not the way you think." Before he could respond, a familiar voice cut through the quiet. "Touching. Really touching." They turned. Veronica Cole stood at the doorway, elegance masking venom. "You two vanished without saying goodbye." "The board is still cleaning up your mess, Ethan." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Veronica, leave." She stepped closer, her heels echoing on the polished floor. "Do you think this little love story will erase what you did? You walked away from everything." "No," Ethan said calmly. "I walked away from you." Lila took his hand. "We are done letting you control the narrative." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "You cannot run forever. The world forgets quickly, but scandals do not." Lila met her gaze, voice steady. "Then let them remember. Because the truth is not shameful when it is honest." Veronica scoffed, turning on her heel and disappearing into the night. The silence that followed was heavy but freeing. Ethan exhaled, his shoulders relaxing as if he had been holding his breath for years. "That felt final," he said. Lila nodded. "Because it was." As they stepped outside, the sea breeze swept through the empty streets, carrying away the last fragments of their old lives. "So," she said, slipping her hand into his, "what happens next?" Ethan looked at her and smiled. "We build something real. No contracts, no headlines, just us." The moonlight shimmered across the water as they walked back toward the inn, side by side, their footsteps in sync. For the first time, the world felt perfectly quiet, as if it had been waiting for them to start again. A year later, the small coastal town had become home. The storm that once surrounded Ethan Cole and Lila Turner was nothing more than a headline buried in the past. Their days were quieter now, filled with work, laughter, and a kind of peace neither had known before. Lila's art studio had grown into a small gallery that doubled as a community space. Children painted on Saturdays, and locals came to talk about dreams instead of scandals. Ethan had invested quietly in small startups around town, teaching young entrepreneurs how to lead with integrity rather than fear. One morning, as the sun streamed through the windows of the gallery, Lila found Ethan hanging a new frame on the wall. It was an old document, carefully matted behind glass, their original marriage contract. She laughed. "You kept that?" He nodded, brushing dust from the corner. "I wanted to remember where we started." Beneath the contract, a new plaque read, "From contract to commitment." She smiled softly. "You are turning our biggest mistake into art." "No," Ethan said, looking at her, "I am turning it into truth." That afternoon, the gallery hosted its first anniversary event. Friends, locals, and even a few reporters came, not for gossip but for celebration. Ethan gave a short speech, his voice calm and steady. "A year ago, I lost a company but found something I did not know I needed. Love that is not written in ink but proven in action. Commitment that is not forced by terms but chosen every single day." When he turned to Lila, the applause faded into a gentle hush. He took her hand and said, "Last time, I asked you to sign a contract. This time, I am asking for something different." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lila covered her mouth, tears forming instantly. "Ethan, no conditions. No 6 months. Just forever, if you will have it." The crowd erupted in soft cheers as he knelt down, opening the box to reveal a simple diamond ring that shimmered in the afternoon light. Lila nodded through tears. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." When he slid the ring onto her finger, the same one that had once worn a symbol of pretense, it now carried a promise made of truth. The room filled with applause, laughter, and the sound of camera shutters, but this time, the attention did not feel invasive. It felt right. Later that evening, when the gallery had emptied, Lila stood beside the framed contract, tracing her fingers over the plaque. "It started with a wrong text," she whispered. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "And ended with the right person," he finished. Outside, the sea breeze carried the scent of salt and possibility. The waves echoed softly against the shore, as if applauding their journey. For two people who began as strangers bound by a mistake, they had written their own ending, one built not on paper, but on love, choice, and the courage to start again.